From cuddling mummified remains to having servants make out with their beds, these are some seriously strange royal rules. Up first is the Christmas weigh-in. It may sound crazy, because it is, but at every Christmas dinner the British royal family holds, every participant has to be weighed on a scale both before and after the dinner. This is really something only royalty or incredibly unhinged parents could come up with. Is this a body shaming thing? Is it about being able to socially restrict how much people eat? Is it about making sure everyone had a full meal, or making sure everyone eats in case one of them is a poisoner? Who really knows? But the tradition has been going on for over 120 years. Allegedly, it was started by Edward VII because he was so concerned that his guests wouldn't have fun at his Christmas party, and he needed concrete proof that they enjoyed the night, which apparently would be proven by how much they ate. Up next is the royal record. Many of these strange royal traditions have originated in a legitimate place of statecraft, but have been so blown out of proportion by ceremony, tradition, and reverence that they barely make any sense now. One such thing is the royal record of gifts. Numerous monarchies have records that go back hundreds and even thousands of years, recording all gifts received and who gave them. At the time, this was certainly important. Keeping track of who was showing their support for your kingdom and rule, who may have slighted you with a poor birthday or coronation gift, and more, was critical to medieval statecraft and has had even importance today. But modern diplomacy doesn't really work this way, and spending thousands of dollars yearly maintaining the entire ceremony around a log of even the most minor gift that may not even exist anymore has been called by some as, well, a waste of taxpayer money. Next is the rule that heirs travel separately. This is another rule that seems almost unreal to the average person, but is actually not even restricted to monarchies. Ever since pre-medieval times, different monarchies have held to the rule that no heirs ever travel together. This comes from a time where suddenly having no heirs could mean the dissolution of a kingdom and civil war, where it wasn't worth a father and son traveling together in case one of them got kidnapped by bandits or mercenaries. Most royal families still abide by this rule, but royalty are no longer the only ones who can't go missing without an heir. The two living Coca-Cola executives who know the formula can't fly on the same plane in case it goes down, and generals and officers are usually prohibited from flying together to prevent another Pushkin airport disaster, which saw 16 Soviet admirals and generals lose their lives in an instant. Up next is linen kissing. Some monarchs were more paranoid than others. Henry VIII, for example, was deeply paranoid about losing his position on the throne. Not only did he have tasters for his ever-flowing river of food, but the servant who made his bed each day was also required, under supervision, to kiss every part of the bed to prove that it hadn't been poisoned. There were compounds known at the time which could be absorbed through the skin, but whether Henry was being reasonable in making his bedmaker make out with his bed every day is up for debate. Up next is sleeping with saints. The Spanish Habsburgs were weird. That's not exactly surprising given that collecting rare genetic diseases and cousin wives was a popular pastime of theirs, but this is easily one of the weirder things they did. It all began when Philip II's son took a hard fall and fell gravely ill. No doctors could do anything, and so, on the advice of religious advisors, he exhumed the 100-year-old corpse of a miracle-working friar and stuffed it into bed beside his son. And guess what? His son's fever broke, and the exhumed friar was canonized into a saint. Thus began a surprisingly long history of Spanish royalty sleeping with saintly remains. It may have been helped by Philip II's literal collection of saintly relics, which included 12 entire saint skeletons, 144 mummified heads, and several thousand different bones, accounting for every single canonized saint except 3. During Charles II's reign in the mid-1600s, a prophecy was foretold. If the Tower of London was ever to lose all 6 of its ravens, the crown would fall and Britain with it. So 6 trained ravens have been kept in the tower ever since, and it's considered a great honor to be appointed as a Raven Master. But that's not to say life is all cushy and easy for the ravens, because these birds have to do a job, and if they don't take their work seriously or goof off too much, they can be fired. The ravens are tasked with helping keep the grounds of the tower clean of debris and trash, but even specially trained royal ravens aren't immune from being replaced. Just a few years ago, Raven Guard George was dismissed for eating too many television aerials. Now he has to go make a living on the street with the common ravens. The next rule is being touch-free. The royal family, of almost any nation that still has a royal family, are special. They're unique, and they are not like us common peasants. They are ordained by God, allegedly, and so, like God, cannot be touched by us grimy common folk. Touching a member of the royal family outside of very explicit ceremony and certain exceptions is not only considered rude, but unsightly, unseemly, and undignified. The royal families of Britain, Jordan, Oman, Bhutan, and some others all have strict rules against royalty touching common people, which makes me like Princess Diana and her willingness to shake the hands of AIDS survivors all the more. Up next is the rule of parliamentary hostage. The United Kingdom was not, in fact, always united. During the 1600s, there was an especially brutal civil war between the parliamentarians and the monarchists. After much history, England settled into a constitutional monarchy, and though it has remained relatively stable for several hundred years, there are still some holdovers. The parliamentary hostage is one of those, stemming from a time when the monarch may have been heading into a hostile and outright aggressive parliament. A member of parliament is kept in Buckingham Palace as a hostage to guarantee the safe return of the monarch. This has continued as a tradition for several hundred years, though is now almost entirely ceremonial. Up next is the most valuable flag on Earth. After the Duke of Wellington trounced Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo, he was granted a house called Stratfield Say as a reward. The thing is, the monarch wouldn't just let the Duke of Wellington get away with something for free. No, they needed payment each year, just like any landlord. And since it was a captured French flag that bought the Duke the home in the first place, it would be a French flag that would pay for the property each year. Though Britain and France are much closer allies now than they were back then, the tradition continues. To rent an equally sized mansion would be several hundred thousand, if not millions of pounds a year, meaning the single French flag paid each year is the most valuable flag on the planet. And finally, the rule of being apolitical. It may seem strange for a head of state to have to remain apolitical, but they do, at least in domestic politics in many places on Earth. There's a reason most absolute monarchies have died off, and most monarchies now are primarily figureheads for their nation. The more a king or queen meddles in their own internal politics, the more likely one side or another is going to want to overthrow them. Whereas overthrowing an entire democratic institution is difficult, overthrowing a single king or royal family is much easier. For democratic monarchies, it's critical that the royalty not play political sides in the government. It would defeat the separation of democracy and monarchy and would sow division locally. These monarchs must be a figurehead, a pretty ornate piece of jewelry that does nothing and offends no one and gets £3 million a year to do it. Those were bizarre royal family rules that will leave you confused. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. It would defeat the separation of democracy and monarchy and would defeat the separation of democracy and monarchy.